Okay, so with this project, we are looking at how to delete a selected row in a data grid view table. So first, we import our system data, which gives us access to classes such as the data table and the data rows, which enable us to create the table rows, which enable us to create tables. So first, we define our table, which has name to the table. So to get this skeleton. So we later move on to add our columns to the table, which is the table dot column dot add, and the name of the column is ID, and we have get type as integer, which is the data type or the data value that column should accept should be integer value only. So we move on to the second column, which is the first name, and its the get type is string, and the last name and get type is also string, and each column has a get type of integer, which means it accepts the integer value. So add some we add rules with some dummy data, which will help us better demonstrate what we want to achieve. So that table.row adds a new row with some dummy data which corresponds to their respective columns. So the one corresponds to the ID and the XXS to the first name, YYY to the last name, and 21 is to the age. The other rows also follows the same process, which is the second one, table.rows.add, which has an ID of 2, SS of and SSS and DDD, and the HQ, aging, SQ, and 33 in that way. So we want to bind our table to our data grid view, and the data grid view one is the name of the data grid view UI we have. So we bind it so that when you run our UI, we are able to see the table on top of the data grid view. So it is binded to the data grid view. The table is binded to the data grid view. So here we have then ID to integer, which is a variable initialize, then if integer try pass test one. So what this is doing is that the if statement is doing that if the user inputs a data into the txt1.test, it tries to convert that data into integer because we only expect an integer variable value from the user because we're using the ID to delete the row. So the for loop here, each row is its function is that it searches for the row whose ID matches the ID the user inputted. That is the function of this for loop here. It searches for the row whose ID matches the ID the user inputted. So if it finds the row, the relation takes place. But if it doesn't, which is this else, an error this message pops up. Please enter a valid ID because maybe the ID doesn't exist in the table. So let's move on to view how the UI works. So we move on with the UI. So we demonstrate how it works using the user interface. So we'll select ID1 and click CG is gone. So let's try ID2. So this is how it works. And thank you for your time. Goodbye.